hello to our dear panelists, which we will introduce in a minute. Welcome everybody to the Corporate Climate Risk Panel. Thank you all for being here.
I noticed.
This morning I promised my wife I wouldn't embarrass myself by making funny jokes or try to do any crowd activities, but the first thing that came to my mind as I was thinking about this panel was, does any of us really think about climate risk? Do we wake up in the morning and say, ooh, I'm going to manage my climate risks? And the answer is probably on the day-to-day, no. However, for corporations and for large organizations, climate risks in a world that is becoming incredibly more complicated, hotter, and more chaotic is something that they need to manage and need to quantify and deal with. And so today, we would like to talk about climate risks and talk about what that means, talk about the landscape and kind of the evolving regulatory and corporate environment when it comes to climate risks, so that we can all better understand how to deal with a warming planet and how to deal with a society that is trying to transition to a lower carbon economy. So I'll just briefly introduce myself. My name is Arod. I am from Deloitte Catalyst. Deloitte Catalyst is Deloitte's startups and innovation platform where we work with our large clients to help them solve their problems with innovation and work with innovators along their journeys with Deloitte services and capabilities. Today with me on the panel, we have esteemed guests. We have Orly, Galit, Ben, and Kim, who will introduce themselves in a second. We will talk about what climate risk is. We'll talk about the current landscape and, of course, about the future. So without further ado, I would like us in the panel to just do a quick round of introduction, starting with you, Orly.
Hi, thank you for inviting me. Orly Glick, the CEO of ESGgo. We're a startup, AI-based regulatory precision regulatory reporting, including climate risk and ESG.
Hi, my name is Galit Ofer. I'm a lawyer, first of all, and
Me too.
Okay, nobody's perfect. And I'm a partner at Shibolet law firm, and I head the environment and sustainability practice.
Hi. Is it on? Yeah. Okay. Hi. Ben Reuveni, the head of Honda Innovations Office here in Israel, part of the global Honda Innovations team. We do investments and other collaborations with startups.
Hi, my name is Kaivanto. I'm from Lancaster University in the UK. I'm a microeconomist. I focus on decision-making under risk and uncertainty applied to various contexts, including climate and cybersecurity and finance. I run our money and banking and finance program, postgraduate programs there, and I've done research across a variety of areas that have brought me here, including venture capital, financing for civil aerospace R&D. I have a long career, by the way, and leading up to some consultancy that I did for a regional bank in the UK that has a business model in which it's giving out 25 to 30-year loans to existing real estate portfolios. Hence, they had to engage with the question of how to price in climate change risk, the two aspects of it, which will be elaborated later. So that's my journey to this panel, and thank you very much for having me. I look forward to the conversation.
You're ruining my questions. No, I'm just kidding. So let's start with just understanding the basics. So Galit, this one's for you. So can you tell us more about the current landscape? What is climate risk? How do you perceive it? How do you manage it? And also tell us a little bit about your work as well.
Okay, so let's begin with the basics. So first of all, climate risks are a physical risk. Arod, you were saying that nobody wakes up in the morning and thinks about climate risks. I'm not sure, because we have climate problems all over the place all the time. I mean, just now, 2 weeks ago, Antonio Guterres, the chief of UN, just said that humanity is playing Russian roulette with the planet, and that's exactly the situation. We have a hotter surface of Earth all the time. We have right now a state of emergency in Florida. We have heat waves in Southeast USA, Greece, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and this is just something that I checked this morning, so I guess it's going to be the same also tomorrow. And we are in June, so it's the beginning of a season of hurricanes and typhoons and cyclones. So first of all, it's a problem of everyone. Once it was just a problem of insurance companies and maybe agriculture, but now there is no one single business that can oversee or ignore climate risks in the physical phase. Second, the transitional risks that you also mentioned in the beginning. The world has to face climate change, so we have an ongoing, ever-growing regulation, laws, policies all over the world, different regulations that deal with the challenges of adaptation of mitigation. So we have carbon pricing, and we have reducing emissions, and we have, on the other hand, subsidiaries and grants. We have bigger issues of liability of businesses. We have climate litigation that just goes on and on. And the third part of climate risks, as we usually divide it, is the part of the opportunities, because in each of these, there is also, in each challenge, there is also a business development opportunity, and we have new technologies, we have building resilience of businesses and their and all their supply chain. So it's a whole world of risks that you have to assess, identify, assess, and manage. And we will talk about it later.
Fantastic. So now let's, in the next couple of questions, we'll dive into specific industries. And Kim, this one's for you. Let's talk about financial institutions, which you obviously spend a lot of time thinking and researching about. How do they manage, assess climate risk? How do they factor, investment decisions? And what is the likelihood of me being able to get insurance on a house in Florida?
Well, thank you for the question. So I think, first of all, we have to realize that the finance industry is not a monolith. I started making a list of how many meaningfully distinct subsectors there are in the finance industry, and I stopped at 12. And I think what's more important than the number is the way in which they differ. There are certain dimensions along which they scale. And so, first of all, is the corporation, is the legal entity publicly listed, or is it privately held? That's one important dimension. Is it a bank which is regulated, or is it a non-bank that has less regulation? What are the disclosure requirements of the institution, et cetera? So that's one sort of dimension along which we need to sort of recognize that these subsectors will behave in different ways. Secondly, what is the maturity of the contracts that they're engaging in? Are they 1-year contracts, 3-month contracts, 1 year, 25-year contracts? That's also super important. And finally, I would say what legal jurisdiction are these taking place in? Because of course you can shop around for a legal jurisdiction that is more amenable to whatever you want to achieve. So that being said, if we think simply about banks, regulated banks, and their lending activities to firms and households, mortgage lending, as you were referring to, so they have started to use essentially the E component of ESG ratings supplied by data providers such as Bloomberg, Fitch, Moody's, S&P, MSCI. These are believe me, there are important firms behind these letters that have actually purchased climate service provider specialist outfits
That's
to do this.
my other question to you. So
Leading into that later, yes. And so they will provide ratings to individual firms in terms of how much, how exposed they are to climate change in its various forms, but also in terms of the impacts that they have on the environment, their CO2 emissions, their methane emissions, et cetera. And of course, those two capture the physical risks that the firms are subject to, as well as the transition risks. If you are a dirtier company, you are more exposed to changes in legislation that will, at some point, if we're going to meet those net zero targets, clamp down on your emissions. Okay? So there's that. We also find that credit rating agencies are beginning to rate us all. Our credit ratings are tied to the geography that we're located in. Where is our home? How exposed am I in given where I live, to flood risk, to hurricane risk, to wildfire risk, and so on. So these are the assessment side of that question. How is it managed? Well, a variety of means. So first of all, that ESG rating, it aggregates across E, S, and G. And so therefore you get a more flattering average result. If you happen to be dirty on the E, then you have a better S and a better G, and you don't look so bad. That's one aspect. The other aspect is that there is benchmarking to the industry, rather than being benchmarked to the cleanest forms of energy or the cleanest sectors of the economy. You're benchmarked to those who are essentially using the same technologies and serving the same markets. So that sort of glosses over some. It doesn't gloss over, but it changes the nature of the assessment. Okay, and beyond that, how is it managed? Well, divestment is one option. Variety of other possibilities, and these methods are sometimes just shifting the risk around, moving it from a publicly listed corporation that has to declare to a privately listed corporation that doesn't have to declare, changing the maturity structure of the financial contract. So allowing repricing to take place more frequently leaves the financial institution with less risk to bear. That's one. Another, your mortgage. Your mortgage may go into a large securitization where the experts that create these portfolios actually try to average across and try to pool across different regions that have different flood risks, different wildfire risks, etc. So there are a variety of techniques by which this is done. Insurance is another one, and we can talk about that later.
So I'm probably not going to get an answer on that condo in Florida. But we talked now about financial industries. Let's move to another industry, automotive. So Ben, now that we've heard what the financial industry is doing, maybe you can share how does your company and your industry manage and focus on and assess and manage risks?
So the risk that the whole move and transition to more carbon neutral mobility and electrical vehicles is a big, immediate, and significant risk for Honda. Reason being that Honda is the biggest internal combustion engine manufacturers. And that's not only because of their car and motorbike production, but also because of the fact they are producing generators and private jets and lawnmowers and even boats, motorboats. So moving all this to carbon neutral economy or balanced offset emissions is a challenge that our CEO took very seriously a year and a half ago, and he pledged that Honda's products will be carbon-free in 2050. Now, this is a long term ahead, so we have some milestones, close, nearby milestones by 2030. And this actually motivates and dictates our investment strategy that is actually the risk mitigation process that Honda is taking. Let's invest in those startups, in those technologies, in those solutions that might help us reach that goal even before 2050.
Thank you. So we'll get to your role as a strategic investor within this effort that you mentioned, but Orly, I want to switch to you, and just want to ask you, how do you view the role of technology in helping corporations manage those risks that we've just heard?
So we're in Israel, the startup nation. Technology and climate is now connected. So I'll allude to some of the stuff that were mentioned here. Galit mentioned the regulation. Kim, you mentioned the different dimensions. It creates a lot of complexity, and a lot of complexity on the data side. Rating agencies that rate, it takes a lot of data to even calculate the risks. So how is the climate risk affecting our company, but also how do we affect the environment? Tons of data points. Ben, you mentioned Honda committing to net zero by 2050. A lot of companies committed to be net zero by a certain date. I'll tell you a secret, they don't know how to get there. A lot of companies. So how is it related to technology and how is it related to data? Each and everything that we mentioned here, all of these dimensions have data behind them. And the first thing to solve the problem is to really measure it. If we look at companies, small-sized companies that would have to actually report by regulation in 2026 about their climate risk, small companies, 250 people and up, they have 400 data points in the company that they need to report, plus 200 to 500 data points for every business unit. Large-sized companies, 1,000 data points in their headquarters and 500 to 1,000 data points in every business unit. This amounts to millions of data points at the end of the day for large companies. So in order to do all of that, to reach net zero, to calculate the emissions, our effect on the environment, but also the risk that the environment has on our company, all of that would need to be supported by data. So that's the way that we look. We're a data and technology company, and that's how we view that. Before we started the company, we spoke to 153 corporations, and every problem was around data. So collecting the data, managing it, measuring it, and then also predicting when are we going to be net zero? Are we going to get there eventually, and what would help us get there? So predictions on net zero. And then obviously there's Gen AI, but we could talk about it later.
Wonderful, thank you. So Galit, let's get back to you for a second. And you know, I think over the last few years, the regulatory landscape has really evolved in different jurisdictions, and we see, you know, U.S. versus Europe versus other jurisdictions. So maybe you can, and obviously, you know, corporations being multinational, they have to deal with a lot of different types of regulations. So maybe you can help walk us through that regulatory landscape. What are the major differences between jurisdictions, and what should we be paying attention to?
So basically, like you said, and everybody knows, the climate regulation, or the ESG regulations and the sustainability regulations, they are all, first of all, they are evolving, and they are happening right now, and it's like on the fly. And second, it's, you said right, it's very different in different jurisdictions. So as a lawyer, I must tell my clients that they have to check in each and every regulation, in every jurisdiction separately. And this is something, of course, that we can help them do. But I can also tell you, maybe this is the good news, that basically they have, all regulations have the same, what lies in the basic is the same. First of all, we need to implement new norms of business. we need to standardize something that is very difficult to standard. Orly mentioned the difficulty in collecting data, and there's another question of which data to collect. So the different regulations, they try to do something of a standardization. They're still on the way. It's not there. We're not there yet. But I can tell you, and this is what I would tell my clients, that there is one, framework that is maybe common to many jurisdictions. It's called the TCFD, the Task Force Climate Financial Disclosure. It's a framework that was developed in 2015 by the Financial Sustainability Board, which is a voluntary board, but it works. And the TCFD lies in the basic of many regulations, so the UK and the Singapore, Canada, and also you can say that the SEC new rules of disclosure, they correspond with the TCFD. So basically what the TCFD says, what we talked about with the different pillars of risks, it's the TCFD. So they say, first of all, governance, how the board and the management deal with the climate risks. Second, strategy. What is the strategy of the corporation in dealing with their risk management? 3 is the risk management that also Kim mentioned before, the identification, assessment, and mitigation. And 4, targets and metrics. So I would suggest, it's considered the gold standard nowadays, so I would suggest begin with that. And the second thing that is like the common denominator is the fact that we all understand that we need to reduce emissions. So we have the GHG protocol, which is the framework of what to measure, how to measure scope 1, 2, 3. And I think that nowadays, almost everyone that deals with climate risks knows these phrases, and I would suggest to begin the measurement of carbon footprint of your business or product or process.
Fantastic. Ben, let's get back to you for a second. So, we talk a lot about regulation and risk assessment, etc. But in the context of Honda, for example, how does your role as a strategic investor play into the ability of Honda to manage those risks, especially the transition risks?
So the investment tool that we are using is pretty new tool, and that's, as I mentioned, the risk mitigation tool for us. It's been nearly 2 years that we are doing investments, and we've done 6 investments so far. As Galit mentioned, we don't know how to tackle this challenge, and the fact that we don't know how to do it makes it a super hard, super challenging task. This is why we take small bets on a very big and promising technologies. Out of those 6 technology companies we invested in the last 2 years, I can mention one which I'm super proud of. It's the Israeli nuclear fusion startup called NT-Tau. They're developing a small nuclear fusion system that can fit in a container like that and can provide up to 20 megawatts.
Sophisticated product placement.
Exactly. Now, this will not solve all our problems, but if it will be a good bet, it will change the energy market and will solve many different challenges that sub challenges that we have. For example, creating net zero production, which is maybe a milestone closer ahead, not talking about the 2050. This is a good example of how do we manage the risk with investments.
Fantastic. And Orly, Gen AI. How does it? I'll be more specific. How do you view this wave of technologies impacting the field of climate risk?
everybody wants Gen AI. Everybody wants AI, right? It's like the board comes to the top management and says, get me some AI. So Gen AI is not the answer to everything. If we think about Gen AI and we talk about large language models, there is not enough data in climate risk. There is not enough experience to train models. So Gen AI can be used in a very specific way to help climate risk. AI as a whole for predictions is different. There's a little bit of a confusion between Gen AI and AI for predictions. Gen AI could help generate text and could help generate conclusions if trained properly or tuned properly to the topic. So we, for example, we use Gen AI in order to take all of that data spaghetti, including all the data, which data, the regulations, the dimensions, this whole thing, and generate a final result. We're using it for it, but our experts are tuning it, are training it. Our ESG experts, our legal experts are tuning those models. So Gen AI is not the answer for everything, but can be used. We use it for to generate a final report in one click. But indeed, there are a lot of other solutions. And artificially, I would divide technologies in climate tech to software, which are not too many, and hardware or chemicals. That's kind of the core at the moment. There are not too many software companies, but yeah, that's just like a general view. And yeah, Gen AI is good. It doesn't solve everything, but can be used for the final result and to grab this whole thing and generate the conclusions and the report by any framework.
Fantastic. Could toy with the idea of having risk GPT. So Kim, before we kind of wrap up and ask everybody a general kind of forward-looking question, I want to get to you. Over the past few years, there's been a wave of acquisitions of companies that provide data and provide services to companies like BlackRock, et cetera. And so this is a whole new sector of kind of climate service providers. Can you maybe illuminate this space a little bit? Tell us about what those companies do and why they're important.
Well, thanks, yes. So we alluded to this already, and the wave of acquisitions has been by the major data platforms and financial data providers. And they've snapped up those climate service providers that can scale to global proportions. And well, what is this climate service provision? It's taking climate information, climate data, weather data as well, looking at how that might impact individual firms, their assets, their supply chains, and so on. And so it's in general terms, it can be any transformation of climate and weather data into implications for individual firms. And of course, this industry works on the basis of the user pays, very much like the credit rating agencies did in the run-up to the financial crisis of 2007. So 2007, 2008. So therefore, there is an adverse incentive issue there, or a challenge there. And beyond that, of course, these climate service providers are having to make forecasts sometimes quite far into the future, where it's very difficult to claw back any monies paid to the climate service provider for forecasts that then turn out to be quite off the mark. So there's what Nassim Taleb would call a need for skin in the game. Okay, and so the firms I alluded to, let's say, Jupiter Intelligence is working very closely with Boston Consulting Group and the U.S. government. That's the pinnacle, if you like, with no disrespect to the other top-end players. But then there's a cascade of firms of smaller and of more specialized climate service providers, all the way down to single person outfits. with one person and their powerful computer trying to crunch numbers. And in between, you have actually, under the guidance of the World Meteorological Organization, you have in the UK the Met Office, the Meteorological Office, which is now providing, we believe, quite independent climate service sort of consultancy, but also in the US, the NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. So they are also entering this space. And throughout this, with perhaps the exception of those national meteorological organizations, there is this double problem of incentives and skin in the game, I would say, at a kind of at a most basic level.
Thank you. It seems like the buzzer is yelling at us. So why don't we just one kind of sentence? Let's do a quick round of what do you think the future holds for climate risk? Orly, let's go with you.
53,000 companies having to report their climate risk. It's bringing a lot of opportunity for business and a good opportunity to fix the world.
First of all, it's going to be hotter. So,
Yes.
Second, the regulation side, it's going to be much more. There's going to be a standard because this is the main pain of businesses, of governments. A standard of reporting and of assessing climate risks.
On the industry side, I would say there will be a consolidation of mobility players. Some, that we know for a decade or so will not be with us in the near future. On one end, and on the other end, the bigger involvement of corporates in climate tech and clean tech technologies.
So back to your original question, I think increasingly we're going to end up paying retrospective carbon taxes through higher insurance premium. Retrospective for our own emissions as well as the emissions of previous generations. So yes, I think the trend is upward, at least in that respect.
My conclusion, I'm going to sell that condo. All right, so thank you very much. This is all the time we have for this session. Panelists, thank you very much for sharing your insights with us, and back to you.
Thank you, Arod, for moderating. Okay, now from cars to blast furnaces and even planes, the world seems to be on a bit of an electrification binge. So what are the challenges and what are the opportunities of doing so? Well, that's the subject of our next